Daniel Elliott was born in December of 1896 within the town of Quincy, Massachusetts. His mother, an Irish immigrant, worked nightly as part of a hospital cleaning crew to pay for what little she could ever provide for her son and his 3 brothers. His father, he would never know. Daniel's upbringing wasn't one to impress. Due to his mother being consistently absent, he had the freedoms as a boy to come and do as he pleased. As a result, with a little bit of poor luck and a multitude of misdirection, he found himself spending time with those which would be most detrimental for his future. By the age of 19, due to gang activity and consistent run-ins with the police, Daniel had spent several sessions in the local penitentiary. In time, his reputation began to precede him, something that he enjoyed greatly. Eventually, as time passed, Daniel dug himself farther and farther into a hardened lifestyle. Starting with drugs and street fights, eventually he moved on to armed theft and multiple counts of near-deadly assault, while finding his way into a strengthening gang known as the Unseen. At the age of 25, Daniel participated in a robbery focusing a family not too far from his own childhood home. They were young, a man and woman with a little boy who, to Daniel's knowledge, had moved in just recently to the area. It's not as if this information affected his choice to take from them. They had things that he wanted, and he had the means to take that which he wanted from them. The father of the house, though, refused to give up that which was his own. In the end, Daniel walked away while the other man gave his life in defense of his wife and child. This meant nothing to Daniel, as he was able to take all that he needed from them. Taking the life of this man had no inherent effect upon Daniel, and due to his gang now having a stranglehold over the local police department, he would face no charges. An innocent family would receive no closure, and Daniel would pay no price. For 2 more years, a mark of fear, anger, and rage would be carved across Quincy and the towns surrounding. As every day passed, Daniel would become more and more engulfed with the actions which brought him power and others pain and torment. Drugs, theft, and murder would become the norm as his humanity was slowly stripped away from him. Though, humanity meant nothing to Daniel Elliott any longer. For him, if it contained no money or high, he had no plans of participating. The peoples whose lives he took were simply obstacles to get him closer to those same 2 joys. As he strayed farther and farther from any sense of moral compass, and his concert for those which were around him eventually dissipated until it was all but gone, Daniel began to truly feel that his drug-fueled and body-strewn life was one that would find a way to continue forever. In the spring of 1924, Quincy, Massachusetts would be hit with a horrifying sickness that would bully its way through all of the state's east coast. Within days following contraction, victims would be struck with an overwhelming fever, which would often lead to coma and eventually full organ shutdown. It was unlike anything the small town had seen, and with medical limitations of the time, little could be done except to avoid contact with others around you and pray for safety. Unfortunately, this would not be enough, as the illness eventually found its way through the mass majority of Quincy. Daniel's mother was the first to go in his family. A battle purportedly ending swiftly, little fight would be given from a woman that Daniel had never really come to truly know. He made no effort to attend her service, not for fear of exposure, but simply because the thought of pretending to care for her death bored him. The sickness would take 2 of his brothers shortly after, with Daniel treating their passing once again as no more than a statistic, comparable to the lives he had taken so easily in the past. Remorse for the dead offered him no positive consequence, specifically money or drugs, and pretending that those with blood ties to him were special in his mind would be no more than a cheap lie. The months following the death of the majority of his direct family offered little change. Daniel would spend his nights on the streets with those similar to him, having little fear of a sickness that he can't see. He had seen the worst in the world and brought it about to others as well, so a silly cough wasn't going to prevent him from anything. It came in the night, waking Daniel from his sleep. His eyes crusted open, but only barely. There was no strength in his body, and the pressure in his chest was overwhelming. Even breathing was a struggle, with an attempt at moving any part of his body seemingly useless. Daniel lived alone, residing within a rundown complex in a single-room apartment. He had no family, so contacting others for help was not an option. The gang which he spent the majority of his time with shared no sympathy among its members, as they were only there to fuel their cravings for drugs, money, and violence. Daniel knew that he was on his own, fighting what he was sure to be the illness that had taken the lives of so many around him in just the months prior. With no ability to fight against something he could not see, and nobody to contact for assistance or support, he felt something within him that he had not felt in a long time: fear. With little option, Daniel kept himself rested against the cheap mattress underneath him. He would have to fight through the sickness in solitude, doing his best to negate the developing waves of pain shooting through his body as he was drifting in and out of stress-filled sleep. It was unlike anything he had felt before, even a life of violence unable to compare to the helplessness that absorbed him. As the minutes passed into hours, the pain only worsened, alongside Daniel's terror. An inescapable realization washed over him. He could be dying. This illness had crippled his town, killing the majority of those that made the mistake of coming across it. Until now, Daniel had disregarded the obvious threat that had edged closer and closer to him in the past months. He had lived a life of invincibility, taking what he wanted from anybody he could get it from, and relishing in the conflict and strife that he caused others. For a split second, he lay in his bed and considered questioning whether or not he should regret the actions which brought him to that very moment in his life. Fortunately, his deep thought allowed a lack of focus on the increasing pain, bringing his body closer and closer to impending failure. This gave Daniel the opportunity to relax well enough to sleep, an opportunity that he desperately craved. He would not wake again.